Can the Pittsburgh Steelers get back on track against another AFC North foe in the Cincinnati Bengals? And who wins the game of the week between the Baltimore Ravens and Philadelphia Eagles? The Ultimate NFL Pregame Show starts now.
It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Every team, every game, every angle. The local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network going head-to-head on every matchup. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Unprecedented insight, unrivaled passion, and unsurpassed knowledge. It's the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. The Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 13 in the NFL is officially here, and we've got everything you need to know heading into the weekend from the local experts across the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Allstriker, and from the primetime game of Bills and 49ers, the big 425 matchup in Baltimore, to why that Steelers and Bengals game is quite the interesting one and why it matters this week. We're going to go game by game to make it the most informed fan for game day. So let's start with a look at the 1 p.m. slate of games in week 13. And kicking us off this week is that Steelers and Bengals game. Pittsburgh coming off what I would call a pretty embarrassing loss to the Cleveland Browns, a team that really isn't going anywhere this season. And Cincinnati coming off of their bye week, hoping to keep their very, very slim playoff hopes alive. So Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, plus Jake Lisco and James Rapine of Locked On Bengals, take it through the game leading up to Sunday.
Guys, let's dive into the keys to victory in this crossover episode presented by PrizePicks, where you can download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play your $5 play. I'm Jake Lisco along with James Rapine from Locked On Bengals, and we've got Chris Carter representing the Steelers and Locked On Steelers in this crossover. And Chris, as we do, let's get into those keys to victory here. From the Pittsburgh perspective, what needs to go right for the Steelers to come out on top in this one?
One, the offense just needs to be competent in this game. And when I say competent, they need to finish drives, prove that those red zone woes are behind them, move the football, control the football, keep the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands, and actually come away with touchdowns. If they're able to do that, the Steelers have shown they can put together game plans that can slow down Joe Burrow. But we've all seen the game where, it's the Steelers still ended up on top, but they forced 5 turnovers in a game once against Joe Burrow, and he still came back to force overtime in the end. Why? Because that offense couldn't possess the football. This Steelers offense, much better at possessing the football. So the first thing, possess the football, control the ball. Right now, the Steelers are the best time possession, the best in time possession right now. That's key number 1 for the Steelers. I'd say key number 2, if you're looking at the defense, you gotta get Joe Burrow off schedule, whether that's bump and run in coverage, taking away the things that he likes to do, or getting pressure, which I think will be the biggest key of those 3 things I just said. That's going to be the factor as far as keeping Joe Burrow off schedule. He's going to get his. And I think that the Steelers kind of acknowledge that on a lot of game plans, like, hey, there's certain players you can't necessarily stop from doing everything or scoring it all, but you can knock them off schedule, and I'll give your offense time to build a lead and put them in behind the 8 ball, so that eventually the Bengals are like, well, the game plan we had for this game can't fully apply right now because we're not in the situation we thought we'd be. So those are my 2 top keys. And if I guess I had to come up with the third one, they need to get back to being able to run the football. They have not run the football well the past few weeks. It was looking very good before Zach Frazier's injury. He got hurt, and then it sort of fell off a little bit. If they can get back to running the football, that'll help with the time possession thing. But that was supposed to be a big identity for them this year, and it has been at times during their 5-game win streak. They had some moments like that, but it hasn't been of the past couple weeks, and that's something they have to get back to here. What are some of the Bengals' keys?
Well, I think key number 1, first and foremost, and you could say it every week, but I certainly think over the past couple of weeks you saw Joe Burrow play at a really high level, and he gets the snot kicked out of him against the Ravens. Same thing against the Chargers. And it's protect Joe. Find a way. I think Orlando Brown Jr. has a good shot to come back. We'll see if he does, if he's able to play. Practiced on Wednesday. How close to 100% will he be? He will not be 100%. I can confidently say that. So how close will he be? Will he be effective? Can they keep Joe upright and limit that Steelers defensive front? I think that's number 1. It just has to be. 2 is defensively, find a way to early on create some big plays. And that could be Russell Wilson interception. That could be Jalen Warren fumble. That could be Najee Harris fumble. That could be a tipped pass because George Pickens runs 2 yards too far to the right and the ball goes up in the air. And Josh Newton, who's going to make his first NFL start, is able to pick it off. Like I think that's it is big plays. And then 3, to me, it's defense again. Finding a way to not let, and Jake's been on this, the moonball thing. You cannot give up these big plays, regardless if you're Cam Taylor-Britt or a rookie in Josh Newton or Geno Stone. Doesn't matter. This secondary, this pass rush, it all has to come together and make sure it limits those big plays for the Steelers, whether it's the run or the pass for that matter. I think that those are the 3 things, and there are a bunch of things. I mean, I honestly, Chris, I think about this team and where they're at, and I could see the Steelers winning this game in a bunch of different ways, which means that the Bengals, that there are a lot of keys to stir the drink, so to speak, to get them to a win. There's
also just this, not to talk about the kickers too much, but man, there's a kicking disparity between these teams this year. And for all this discussion about what needs to go right on offense and defense, we've seen the Bengals stay in games against everybody but Philly this year because their offense and defense have done enough. And in a lot of those games, the Bengals kicking unit has let them down. Meanwhile, you got a kicker in Pittsburgh who has been lights out this year. So there's a kicking disparity in this game where previously I would have felt very confident with the Bengals and Evan McPherson coming into this year. And lately, that's certainly not been the case, to the point that we've got stories about, what's going on with the holding and kick and snapping operation, and learning about revolutions on the snap to make sure the laces are caught by the holder in the right, like it's that level of conversation around what's going wrong with the Bengals kicking game right now. So I'm just going to throw that one out there as another one, because it really has cost the Bengals. As you mentioned, Chris, some of the games you've watched this year and against some other teams this year where they're just not getting those clutch kicks when they need them, in addition to other clutch plays. So I'm just throwing out the specialist there is another one that the Bengals need to kick better.
Yeah, in 2 games against both Harbaughs. The Charger game, Evan McPherson misses 2 kicks in the 4th quarter. And then week 5 against the Ravens, you outplay the Ravens, you get a gift in overtime, you should win in the hold. Like just those 2 plays alone, or 3 plays, are just game changers, momentum changers.
That's a lot of factors there. And I think that's the thing, is that this is still a divisional game. As much as, like, I think Bengals fans are down, Steelers fans are they're always down after one loss. It don't matter what their record is. They're just why they want to be negative. But I think there's this want to kind of say, no, we are the more miserable right now. But at the end of the day, like, I think this is still going to be a tough divisional game. We'll both get to our predictions in the next episode that we each do. But I still think these are 2 teams. They know each other well. They both have different weaknesses that each of them can strike at. And that's where I think it's going to come down to, is who can use their strength first in this game to set the pace.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that the Bengals are favored in this game, despite what the standings say, despite what they've done against teams with winning records this year, despite what they've done in close games. But despite all of that, I think that where Vegas isn't totally out to lunch on this is that the Bengals, because of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown, and because Trey Hendrickson can take over games sometimes, we saw him do that against the Chiefs, and that's the reason the Bengals were right there with the Chiefs defensively in that game, long time ago now. But you get the point. There's the Bengals can be better than their record, but they haven't been able to finish games. And in a game that could be close, because these teams are so familiar with each other, and it is an AFC North game, and it isn't Cincinnati, all of that stuff comes into what should be another good one in the AFC North. It's just crazy that we're not talking, Chris, here until December. I mean, what are these schedule makers doing? It's so late in the year.
Hard knocks, man. They're all up. They're taking up our parking spaces. They're all over the place. They're extra cameras in every scrum. I hope HBO and Max, they hope they get their money's worth for this stuff, because we certainly are being accommodating here.
Check Chris out over at Locked On Steelers. Check Jake and James out over at Locked On Bengals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals take on the Minnesota Vikings, two NFC teams that are looking to improve their playoff standing. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Luke Braun, Locked On Vikings. Take it through big storylines, key matchups, and so much more.
All right, rubber meets the road. These two teams, I think both of these teams have playoff aspirations, right? And I think the NFC West is in such a strange spot that the Cardinals it feels like you're only sending one team and the rest of them are getting, are falling behind the Vikings, the Packers, the Commanders, and all these other like kind of also rans in their division. So I feel like this is really, really key for how things are going to shake out in January. What is the one thing the Cardinals cannot afford to do?
One,
like the most important, if they do this, it's over. Like the biggest,
they cannot repeat the offensive line performance from last week.
Okay.
I think that's it. Like it has been the calling card for this team, allowing Kyler Murray to go through his progressions, allowing Kyler Murray to be special. If Kyler Murray doesn't have the ability to be special because he doesn't have the time to do so, that's a game changer. I don't care about how well the defense plays. The Cardinals can't move the ball down the field. None of this is going to work. So the offensive line is wildly underrated. They've overproduced above expectation, and they just laid an egg last week. Can't happen. Can't happen again.
I think similar thing for the Vikings. It's penalties and turnovers, and that's been kind of the case for a couple years now. They've had the turnover bug. Aaron Jones never fumbles, got the fumble bug now that he's here, right? He's fumbled a couple of times in the last couple of weeks. He fumbled on the goal line twice this year. And he's getting frustrated with it, like you can tell. So it's obviously the Sam Darnold turnover thing. So it's turnovers, and they've also had a lot of pre-snap issues. I think that they adjusted how they do their sideline operation, and I think that actually helped. But they had a lot of delay of games, false starts, play clock issues, illegal formations and illegal motions and stuff. Just like the operation was a little bit too complicated, and Sam Darnold needed a couple weeks to figure out how to run it. So it's those kind of sloppy things. I don't know. It feels to me like this game comes down to that who's going to outmuscle who in the secondary when the Vikings have the ball. And then it's just that explosiveness. There's going to be some 40-yard ridiculous play, some ridiculous swing that's going to be the thing that breaks this game. I think you're going to have them both ways. That's how every Vikings game has gone. But like that's where I feel this game is going to like exist. But where do you think this thing comes down to?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the interesting history, I think, the Minnesota went up 21-0 at State Farm Stadium and ended up losing that game, ended up being down at halftime with the Greg Joseph missed kick, a walk-off.
Oh, the 2021 game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, the last few years, man.
It's just been
years off my life.
It's wild. Yeah, really. Yeah. No, so for the Cardinals, like one thing you mentioned about turnovers, like the Cardinals defense on paper is one of the least talented fronts in football. I mean, you've got guys like Kazir White and Mac Wilson, two subsequent season signings that have been fantastic in the middle of the field. They're going to run a lot of dime, but the thing is, the big thing that's really changed the landscape of this defense the last couple of weeks, the exotic blitz packages where you don't know who's coming. Buda Baker is going to live around the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. He's the new age version of Tyrann Mathieu, who does things better at times than Honey Badger does and has done. He's different.
Or how about Harrison Smith, huh? We got to start making him a household name. The Hall of Fame case is coming.
Cool. He's not a Cardinal, so I don't really talk about it much. But it's like, don't be surprised if Sam Darnold is on the ground with Mac Wilson and Buda Baker on top of him, or Max Melton and Garrett Williams, trying to rip the ball from him. The opportunistic nature of this defense is starting to become, but isn't quite terrifying yet. It's on the precipice. So they have the tendencies to be able to do that already. It's just a matter of filtering out the baby fat, as it were. Because the front is terrible. Like the interior defensive line isn't good. You may see rookie Darius Robinson, his first action, 27th overall pick out of Missouri on Sunday, which could add a boost. But the blitz pressure the Cardinals get very rarely is from the usual suspects that you'd see blitz pressure coming from. So it's going to be fascinating to see what the mad scientist Nick Rallis does on side. But that's another big thing
It's
for me.
probably by design, right?
No, it has to be. No, it's
like, why would you send the guy everybody expects to come?
Well, no, you don't. If you have a good player there, you send the guy. But they've had to adapt and evolve and survive, and they figured out something pretty special there.
Yeah, and look, there's good players and then there's good blitzers too. Like sometimes you can be a specialist, especially from the secondary, like a safety with any pass rush chops or a safety that sucks in coverage. Yeah, send that guy. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in this one. I'm excited for this matchup because I am very unfamiliar with the Cardinals. I'm a little more familiar now. Now I got at least the broad strokes we can get in a half an hour, but the NFC West is just fascinating to me too. And this is going to be possibly decisive, especially as common games come into play and everything is so tight. It looks like it's going to come down to tiebreakers and all of that. Do you have any other like senses for what this comes down to? If you want to do a score prediction, now would be the time.
Yeah, I don't really score prediction. It's like the thing for the Cardinals is it's no longer a barometer check that if it's a close game and you lose, there's no impact. That's what the early season was. This could legitimately be, if the Cardinals win this game, a first round playoff matchup. Because
absolutely, yes.
And that's the wildest part about this. If the Cardinals can run a string, win this week, beat Seattle next week, like we're looking at the Cardinals potentially getting that 2 seed, depending on what happens with Philly if they lose a couple of games. Because it's not if
they're 9-2. They won 7 straight. That they might not fall away.
they may not, but it has been not an if, it's been a when for Philly. And I know that's a far outlier. We've got a lot of football to play, and chances are that won't happen. But if the Cardinals win on Sunday, Luke, just like the NFL does, there's no reason why the Cardinals win this game. That's all the reason why the Cardinals win by a field goal and the rest of the NFL is off its head. It's just one of those. I don't think they'll win. I think it's going to be tight, and it's going to come down to penalties and turnovers, as you mentioned.
It always comes down to that stuff. So Vikings are 3.5-point favorites at home. That tells me, honestly, that like FanDuel thinks that these teams on a neutral field aren't that far apart. And I don't think that they're wrong about that. Yeah. This could have, Vikings very favored to be the 5 seed. So whoever wins that NFC West, maybe it's the NFC South winner, whoever that ends up being, probably Falcons. But whoever's the 4 seed, like if the Cardinals are in the playoffs, the 4 seed feels like the most likely place for them to be there. So yeah, you're right. This could absolutely be a playoff preview.
Luke is great. Check him out over at Locked On Vikings. Alex is great. Check him out over at Locked On Cardinals, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Los Angeles Chargers suffered a tough loss to the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football in Week 12. They'll look to bounce back against the Atlanta Falcons, who are coming off of their bye week. So Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers and Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons take you through everything you need to know leading up to Sunday.
Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons with Daniel Wade of Locked On Chargers here for Crossover Thursday, presented by PrizePicks. Make sure you download the app and use code Locked On NFL, and you'll win $50 instantly when you play $5. So let's get into some of these keys to victory, Daniel, for the LA Chargers. What are 3 things that we need to see this Chargers team do in order to emerge with a win on Sunday?
Well, Aaron, there's nothing they can do. That's why I muted myself. The Chargers will lose this game, no matter what. I don't think they have a chance. No, I think there's a lot of common denominators of what has kind of gone into most of the Chargers wins, or all of the Chargers wins. But I think when you look at what happened in this last game specifically, I think the thing at the top of the list, especially playing for a Jim Harbaugh team, is just raising the level of physicality. Like, I don't think many things get under Jim Harbaugh's skin more than losing and kind of getting bullied the way that they did, right? And now you're going up against one of the top backs in Bijan Robinson, and love his game. You have to be able to raise that physicality, not just offensively, but defensively as well. I think one of the big things you saw from the Chargers wide receivers is just like they got out physical. They were getting grabbed. The Ravens went into that game basically saying, we're just going to grab the hell out of everyone and make them throw the flag every single time, right? And the Chargers wide receivers outside of Ladd McConkey, who's not just a Georgia Bulldog, but just a certified dog in general, he was able to do it. The other guys weren't. So I think raising the level of physicality will be key in this one. Winning on 3rd and 4th downs. Aaron, if I was the Falcons going into this game, I would go for it on every 4th down. Okay, maybe that's maybe a slight exaggeration, but the last 3 games, opposing teams have converted every single 4th down attempt against the Chargers. 6 out of 6 2 fourth down conversions per game the Chargers are allowing over their last 3 games, and just the inability to get off the field on third down for what's supposed to be a really, really good defense. The Ravens converted at over a 50% clip last week, and over the last 3 games offensively for the Chargers, they've only converted third downs at a 34% clip. Not good enough. Like, it's crazy that 2 of the games were wins that we're talking about in that span, and that's what they're doing on third downs. Huge reason the Chargers have been settling for too many field goals. And then, kind of like you talked about, take advantage of the Falcons' lack of a pass rush, right? If you can't hold up against this group, who can you hold up against? But I do think that the matchup that'll be really interesting to watch is even maybe not having their best years, right? Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata versus a very, very poor Chargers interior. I mean, when you're looking at where the pressure has come from against this team this year, it's the interior. They have an all-pro left tackle. They have a rookie kind of phenom at tackle with Joe Alt, who's played well above his years. The interior is where the Chargers have really, really struggled. And even for a team that's averaged less than 1 sack per game this year in the Falcons, it's going to concern me going into every game. So if they can take advantage of that lack of a pass rush, let Justin Herbert pick them apart, that'll be key to a victory.
Yeah, and I hope the Falcons can take advantage of that weak interior where some of their most reliable pressure comes from linebacker Caden Ellis with some of the off-ball blitzes that they like to throw at them. But when I look at sort of the keys to victory for the Falcons, one of those is sort of keeping Justin Herbert contained. And they're going to have a hard enough time to stopping Justin Herbert's arm in this game. And so if his legs get involved, and we've seen that happen these last couple of weeks, that's going to be a nightmare for this Falcons defense. It's just going to be too much for them to handle. And that's where they need linebacker Troy Anderson, who's been battling a knee injury all season long, back healthy this week to spy. He's the only guy in the middle of that defense that has the athleticism to be able to maybe make an open field tackle against Justin Herbert if he does decide to tuck it and run. So in addition to the Falcons pass rush getting home up the middle, they're going to need that linebacker play to step up in the event that pass rush does not necessarily keep Herbert contained in the pocket. And then the other key for me is they need a fast start offensively, right? They don't want to get behind against this Chargers pass rush now that it seems like it's fully healthy with Khalil Mack working his way back, Joey Bosa, Tuli Polotau, Bud Dupree, former Falcon, and whatnot. The Falcons' offensive line, as good as it is not really built to play from behind. And so if the Chargers get off to a lead and those guys are able to pin their ears back, it's going to be trouble for the statuesque Kirk Cousins in the pocket. And basically the simple stat that basically tells me that how the Falcons start is going to kind of dictate how they win the game is when they score a touchdown in the first quarter this year, they're 5-1. When they don't, they're 1-4. So it's simple as that. We'll probably have an answer on whether or not the Falcons are going to win this game by the end of the first quarter. If they have 7 points on the board, they got a good shot. If they don't, it's going to be a problem. So that's my second key to victory. And that last one is, win the turnover battle. It's a cliche thing, in this league, but it's so true when it comes to the Falcons. You look at their wins this year, they're +6 in turnover margin, and their losses, they're -8. Now, it's going to be hard to win a turnover battle against the Chargers because they've turned the ball over a league low 5 times this year. So they're not going to give the ball away, right? The Falcons going to have a hard time taking the ball away from this Chargers team. But if they give the ball away to the Chargers team, this is going to be a self-defeating prophecy for them. So they can't afford. Basically, I'm saying, instead of winning the turnover battle, maybe Jesse Bates can steal one from Justin Herbert, throwing it to Ladd McConkey, or maybe Quentin Johnson will drop one into AJ Terrell's hands or something like that, and they might get an interception that way. But it's one of those things where it's not really winning the turnover battle. Just don't turn the ball over if you're the Falcon. Don't give the Chargers extra opportunities for them to, Justin Herbert and this offense to find ways to win against a bad Falcons defense. So those are, for me, the 3 keys to victory. Daniel, what are sort of any parting thoughts for the listeners here on Locked On Chargers and Locked On Falcons on this crossover Thursday before we duck out of here?
Yeah, man, I totally agree with, what the game plan should be and kind of the ways that the Falcons can win on this one. It's interesting hearing, another team who has some of the same struggles, but also kind of has some inverse struggles that the Chargers have, right? Because the Chargers have started really hot. And I think that's why you make such a good point about the Falcons starting hot in this game, because even in this last game on Monday Night Football, it'd be easy to forget that the Chargers were up 10-0. And it hasn't been the first time that they've gotten up big and allowed a team to come back on them. So I think that for the Chargers, it's more being about a second half team, right? And not allowing those leads to go as quickly as they have. And the one thing about this Chargers team is, say what you will about them, they've always come out incredibly prepared. Like even in this last game, right? They forced 2 punts against the Ravens before they ended up going and scoring on 5 straight drives. So can the Chargers continue to be a very prepared team coming up against a team that just came off a bye week? I mean, this is a hugely pivotal game for both of these teams. Chargers have the Chiefs coming up next on their schedule, a team that they haven't beaten since 2021. And there's some teams in the AFC that can push them, right? So I think that for this matchup, it is hugely important for both of these teams' playoff implications. For the Chargers, it's like, hey, just like the defense has been in the last couple of games, you can't let this spiral, man. Like, you lost one game, you're 7-4. You got the Chiefs next week. You go lose this game, you're staring down the barrel of a 3-game losing streak, and teams like the Broncos potentially passing you, teams like the Dolphins who were outdone, them coming back a little bit and getting on your heels. So I think it's a hugely important game for both teams. And for the Chargers, a lot of those things they have to try to take away as far as your keys for victory, because that has been things that have doomed them all season long.
Well, for any Chargers out there listening, don't listen to what Daniel says. Treat this game like it's nothing. Get ready for the Chiefs game.
Overlook it.
Yes.
Overlook
the
this
Atlanta
game.
Falcons.
Man, I hope it's a weird game. I remember the last game, man. It was a weird game. Drake London recently said it was his, welcome to the NFL moment when Khalil Mack just totally like little boyed him, just stole the ball right out of his hands. And then was it Daquan Jones who just looked at Justin Herbert and fumbled after the Chargers had fumbled. He's running down the sideline. The game's pretty much over, right? And then he just fumbles. The Chargers had that happen to them this year. Tierra Tar intercepted Kyler Murray, and just you realize, hey, this dude's never carried the ball offensively in his life. And then he fumbles it, and it immediately took me back to that Falcons game, that weirdo Falcons game.
Yeah, that was Taquan Graham that did the
Taquan Graham. Yeah.
So, yeah. Falcons Chargers, it's going to be a weird one. It's just the nature of these two teams. And the last 2 times they faced Justin Herbert, it has ended with Justin Herbert leading the Chargers down the field in the fourth quarter to win the game. Hopefully that won't happen a 3rd time in a row, but we'll see.
Go check Dan out over at Locked On Chargers. Go check Aaron out over at Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Seattle Seahawks are looking to continue their strong stretch under head coach Mike Macdonald. The New York Jets, on the other hand, looking to just find some semblance of winning football. Rob Rang of Locked On Seahawks and John Butchko of Locked On Jets have everything you need to know for the matchup.
Crossover Thursday here on this Thanksgiving. John Butchko, Locked On Jets, along with Rob Rang, Locked On Seahawks, getting ready for Sunday's game between the New York Jets and the Seattle Seahawks. These teams have a really interesting history. Lots of fairly memorable games these teams have played. I remember back in '97, Bill Parcells' first game as Jets head coach was a game in the Kingdom where the Jets, they were coming off a 1-15 season, and the Jets went up there and beat the Seahawks 41-3. The next year game, I won't mention for you guys know what happened in '98 with Vinny Testaverde at the Meadowlands.
Yep.
I think it was in December too, so we won't mention that. But 10 years later, 2008, Brett Favre goes to Seattle, a snowy day, and Mike Holmgren's last home game as Seahawks last game as Seahawks head coach. The Seahawks beat the Jets and contribute to the demise of the Favre Jets. Some really interesting games these teams have played through the years, Rob. Sunday, the 2024 version of Jets and Seahawks. What are the keys to victory for Seattle?
Well, first off, it's just I love that you mentioned those games. One of the very first games I remember attending as a fan, as a kid, was the game that you mentioned before. Bill Parcells, his first season, coming out for the 1-15 season. There was an awful lot of expectations in Seattle in that opener, and I remember bringing my best buddy Gino up there to the game with me, and watching the Seahawks get absolutely throttled, as you said, I think 41-3, and just that was about as big of a disappointment as I've ever seen in an opener. And so that was a fascinating game. And then I was fortunate at that point, a accredited member of the media, and was down on the field for Brett Favre's final game, and the snow coming down, and literally there were snowballs being thrown at Brett Favre, at the late Seattle owner Paul Allen, and batting snowballs away so that the athletes and the owner at that point were getting pelted with snowballs. I mean, there's just some memorable experiences. So I love that you just mentioned that. As far as Sunday's game, again, as I mentioned before, I really think that these are two teams that are so similar in so many different ways. It just feels like that one team is really starting to hit on all cylinders, and the other team is kind of flatline at this point. And so that is I'm fascinated to see if the Jets coming off of their bye are able to regroup a little bit and get a little bit more timing between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson, wherever the case might be. The team that runs the ball effectively, I think, and I know that that's as cliche as it gets, but I think it's really true in this particular football game because you are going against two pretty stout defenses, two somewhat enigmatic quarterbacks. And so I think that, again, the team that is able to run the ball a little bit more effectively, I think it's fascinating because Breece Hall was the only running back that was selected ahead of Kenneth Walker III a couple of years ago, and they both have shown their big play ability. Neither have had the numerical statistical success so far this season that I think people who drafted him in the first round of their fantasy football draft, for example, might have been expecting, or maybe second round. But the point is that I really do think that's going to be one of the biggest keys to this football game. Obviously, whoever controls the clock, whoever limits turnovers, but I think that the team that runs for the most yards in this game winds up winning the football game.
Rob, I think in many ways it's going to come down, and not so much who wins, but just whether this is competitive is what Jets team shows up for this one. Because as you mentioned, they are coming off their bye, and the last couple of weeks, it's kind of felt like the Jets have come out really, really flat, and that's been one of the stories of the season. If they were like in the game late in the second quarter, they really started to focus and key in, and they, even though they lost to the Colts, they turned it into a game. Thursday Night Football, Halloween night against the Houston Texans, they played a really bad first half, but they were still in it. Quinn and Williams made some big plays to hold Houston down in that one, and they fought back and won. And then game a couple weeks ago against Arizona, the Jets just came out flat, and the Cardinals steamrolled them. The Cardinals scored touchdown after touchdown after touchdown, and you just kind of saw the Jets lose their fight. And I'm always like hesitant to question like effort when we're talking about professional athletes, but there were moments in that game against Arizona where you saw it's not, I don't know if guys weren't trying, but you saw like a Jets defender trying to make a tackle, and the second and third guys are just kind of standing around instead of rallying to the football and going after them. It's just like little things like that you see. And this Jets team is now out of the playoff race. If you've been watching Jets games over the last month, you've always heard the announcer say, well, we spoke with Aaron Rodgers, and he thinks the schedule is softening up, and this is going to be the game that turns it around. And I think the illusion that the Jets were going to be able to turn it around finally ended 2 weeks ago against the Indianapolis Colts. At 3-8, I think there's really no coming back from this. So the question is, how much passion will we see the Jets play with? Will we see the team that fought to victory against Houston? Will we see the team that, didn't show a lot of fight against Arizona? I think that's the question. That's the question of whether it's going to be a close game. I don't think the Jets are going to blow the Seahawks out. I think that there are three possible outcomes in this game. I think that the Seahawks could blow the Jets out if the Jets don't take, if the Jets come out flat, or it could be a close game that goes either way. And part of it will be, how does the team respond to everything that's happened? Apparently there was an owner mandated practice during the bye week that the head coach was going to give them off, and the owner said, no, you're practicing. I don't know that that's going to have a good impact. I may have no impact. I don't know that's going to have a good impact on morale, but it's kind of where we're at in this Jets season. I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say it's a season that began with Super Bowl hopes, but when those things fall apart, you never know how it's going to impact the team.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that feels like Seattle was basically experiencing that a couple of weeks ago. And then they had their bye week, they were able to get healthy. And that's one of the things that it feels like that this is a team that's getting even healthier. I mean, Uchenna Nwosu is not going to be back on the field in this particular game, but he in the past had been one of Seattle's best pass rushers, certainly its toughest, most physical run defender at the outside linebacker position. And he is expected to be coming back after this week or maybe 2 weeks from now, but still his injury opening was basically set up this past week. So I guess one of the questions I have is, to me, as we talked about, this feels like a team, that the Jets squad, that if they do play, if they focused, if they are ready to play, if they're not flat, that I need to think that this game could be close. To me, the Jets have some defensive playmakers We talked a little bit about Quinton Williams. Obviously, his brother Quincy Williams is a terrific football player as well. I wanted to ask you about Will Montgomery and the possibility, Will McDowell, and the possibility of his pass rush ability. Seattle has some moving parts along the offensive line. Abraham Lucas is coming back from an injury, and then at the guard position specifically, Christian Haynes was drafted this year. He's a rookie, and then Satoa Leomea is a rookie as well. Those two players may be playing significant minutes. They're both in the idea, or both in the plans to be rotating at the right guard position. Quinton Williams doesn't usually line up against them. He's more often going up against the left guard, who would be another Jets former player, and Laken Tomlinson. So some of the struggles there. Do the Jets have enough firepower on defense, essentially, to be able to turn what could be a close game into one where the Jets are able to kind of steal a victory, as they did against the Houston Texans?
Yeah, in that game, Quinton Williams played a huge role. I mean, Texans had some chance to blow that game open in the first half, and every time Quinton Williams made a big play, he had a strip sack on C.J. Stroud, a couple other big tackles for loss, and Will McDonald was the first round pick a year ago. Having a big season statistically, I think if you've been watching the games, he hasn't been quite as good as the numbers would suggest. A number of his sacks have come on plays where he was unblocked, but he's developed a really nice spin move. He's not much of a run defender at this point, really struggles to hold up. Doesn't really set the edge all that well, but can get to the quarterback. And, this defensive line, if it performs up to standards, can keep the Jets in the game. I've kind of given up hope on Hassan Reddick, but that's another story. But Quinton Williams and Will McDonald, they're a nice 1-2 punch when we talk about the pass rush.
Check out Rob over at Locked On Seahawks and John over at Locked On Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming up in the second part of the Ultimate NFL pregame show here for Week 13, we'll dive into the remainder of the 1 p.m. games. A lot of good matchups to go. Don't go anywhere. Lots to dive into in the Ultimate NFL pregame show. First, the show is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to watch football live, and a memory I have is I went to the Super Bowl between the Ravens and the 49ers in New Orleans during that 2012-2013 season, and it was incredible. A lot of craziness all the way around, and I'm looking forward to making a bunch of new memories whenever I go to games. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you all the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And Gametime has tickets for all events, concert shows, not just sports. So for the Ravens and Eagles game, big game coming up in Week 13, go to Gametime to check out all they have to offer. They have super deals and other tiers of deals as well. Plus, the app has a ton of great features. You got Gametime Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. Spell the LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. We're back, round 2, Ultimate NFL pregame show here, Week 13 style. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here. We talked about the first part of the 1 p.m. slate. Let's dive into the next part of it here. Starting off, the Tennessee Titans picked up a big upset win over the Houston Texans in Week 12. Meanwhile, the Washington Commanders suffered a heartbreaking loss to the Dallas Cowboys. Absolutely unreal how that game ended up going. So you have Tyler Rowan of Locked On Titans, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders with how this matchup might go and which team could come out on top.
All right, football fans, we're going to cap off today's crossover Thursday, Week 13 matchup, Tennessee Titans at the Washington Commanders. Once again, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans and Locked On Commanders your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL. Whether it be me in the mornings as the madman, whether it be the barber in the afternoons, Tony Wiggins, Locked On NFL is free. It's year-round. It's Monday through Friday, NFL content. You're not going to want to miss it. David obviously helps out with the Locked On NFL podcast as well. So definitely do appreciate you guys. We'll check out the Locked On NFL podcast. But with that being said, we do got to look into kind of some predictions. I don't want to say necessarily predicting what's going to happen, but some things that need to happen for both of these teams. As the away team, David, I will kick us off before. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. This is a Thursday show. Want to make sure that we say that. Everybody who celebrates out there, hope you have a happy and relaxing Thanksgiving. But But for the Titans, for me, you have to run the football. You talked about it, that the Commanders have not been a great run defense. And I think the Titans already, with the way their offense is set up, everything is predicated on the run game. I think the Titans are going to have to be a little bit different in the run game than they were last week against the Texans. Something I broke down on my Tic Tac Titans film channel on Wednesday, the way the Titans attack the aggressiveness. I think the Commanders are going to be a much more disciplined defensive line, and you're going to get yourself in trouble if you don't run the football and put yourself in those 3rd and long situations where the Commanders can clamp down with their tight man coverage and get the pass rushers loose. So the Titans absolutely have to run the football here. And honestly, they've been pretty good at running the football this year. So that might be a good matchup for the Titans. I also think stopping Terry McLaurin is going to be clear. Now, David, I don't mean to be disrespectful to some of the other options that the Commanders have, like, Daimi Brown or Zach Ertz. But the reality is, I don't think that the Commanders have a great set of skill position players outside of Terry McLaurin. So if you let Terry McLaurin beat you, you are absolutely going to lose. Now, you may still lose, even with Terry McLaurin not going off. But you give yourself a much better chance of winning if you hold Terry McLaurin down and force sort of the other guys to do it. I don't want to completely neglect Jaden Daniels here either. So my third key to victory, other than slowing down Terry McLaurin and running the football, my third key to victory here is containing Jaden Daniels. The Titans have really struggled with mobility at the quarterback position, whether it be Drake May, whether it be Josh Allen running around. Like, even Justin Herbert was able to make some plays. Sam Darnold, who's not a super mobile quarterback, he looked like Michael Vick and Joe Burrow the way he was navigating in the pocket. I know that's weird to use those two names at the same time, but if you know ball, you know Joe Burrow is a Jedi in the pocket moving around. But the Titans have really struggled with mobility. They've really struggled with quarterbacks to actually finish their sack opportunities and get them to the ground. Jaden Daniels is by far the best mobile threat that the Titans have faced at the quarterback position. I'm taking the over on Jaden Daniels' rushing yards in this game. I think he's going to give the Titans fits, and if they allow that to beat them, they have no chance to win the game. So run the football, contain Terry McLaurin, contain Jaden Daniels in the run game, and the Titans should have a good shot to get their second win in a row.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, if they can do those three things, you're absolutely correct. They can certainly make this thing more of a game than most people would have thought it would be a month ago, right? You go back to like October 25th and say, oh, this Titans game here in 3 or 4 weeks, how's that going to go? And everybody say, the Commanders are going to get that one, no problem. Now the way that things are going, however, that's not the case. And one of those things that's happening is that the Washington Commanders offense is leaving the defense out there. Washington Commanders offense is not giving the defense enough of a break and leaving the defense out there far too long because they're losing the time of possession battle. And Tyler, the Washington Commanders are 1-4 in games this year where they're losing the time of possession battle. And obviously, time of possession correlated to wins is kind of a no-dust stat connection, right? Yeah. But there's a difference between teams that want to win the time of possession to win games, and there's teams that need to win the time of possession to win games. This team needs to win the time of possession. That one win, Chicago Bears, which they should have lost, right? Like in the grand scheme of everything, without a Tyreek Stevenson on the field, they should have lost that game. So really, this team should be 0-5 in games where they don't win the time of possession battle. And the way that you do that, if you're the defense, because we've gone weeks now where we're kind of saying, okay, offense needs to string together drives. How can we get the offense to get more first downs and do all this other stuff? And yeah, that's absolutely so important. But from a content standpoint, now I need to tell listeners, this defense needs to force 3 and outs. That's what needs to happen. Is this defense now has to kind of say, not only is it our job to keep the score as low as possible for as long as possible, it's our job to now get ourselves off the field. And obviously you want to do that anyway, but give ourselves the break that we need is probably the better way to say that. But the Tennessee Titans, I mean, I know they're not ranked really high in like first downs per game. I think against the Minnesota Vikings, they only had 11 first downs, but at the same time, they've only gone 3 and out like 6 times over the past 3 games. So this isn't a team that goes 3 and out all that often. So the Washington Commanders need to come out here and maybe get 4 3 and outs in this one game alone, so that if this offense still needs some time to kind of make things happen, they can have their time to rest on the sideline while that's all happening. The next one's get Jaden Daniels right. You want to stop Terry McLaurin. Right now, the Washington Commanders are doing a lot of that on their own by lining him up on the left side of the formation, and Jaden Daniels is throwing about 70% of his passes to the right side of the formation. Now, doesn't mean Terry can't run from the left to the right? But there's a big deficiency in how
this quarterback likes to play, what side of the field he likes to execute on, and where his number one receiver is a lot. Need to see Cliff Kingsbury get that correct, and that's part of getting Jaden Daniels right, because guess what? If Terry McLaurin is running past an overloaded left side of the defense and Jaden Daniels can throw over that blitz or over that overloaded rush, maybe things are going to go a little bit better. You force that defense to back off a little bit, then it opens up the field a little bit more for guys like Noah Brown, Zach Ertz, so on and so forth. And then finally, get Ben Sinnott used in more of a Kyle Juszczyk role. Ben Sinnott, rookie tight end, when he was drafted out of Kansas State, Adam Peters, who came from the San Francisco 49ers, said, this is our Kyle Juszczyk. That's what we see in Ben Sinnott. Well, guess what? When you've seen Ben Sinnott have the opportunities to get his Juszczyk on, he's done really well. Go back to that rushing touchdown Jaden Daniels had against the Cowboys in the beginning of the second half. Kyle Juszczyk is the guy laying the lumber on a Dallas Cowboys defender to free Jaden Daniels up to get into that end zone, ironically, on the left side of the offensive formation. Do more of that. You mentioned the Los Angeles Chargers game, Tyler, and I actually studied that offense against the Titans defense specifically for this matchup. So I'm really glad that we're on the same page there. And what did the Los Angeles Chargers do? Pretty much every time they ran between the tackles, definitely every time they ran between the guards, they used a fullback. And it was actually kind of funny to me because there was really no trickeration to it. If there was a fullback on the field, the Chargers were running between the tackles. And they said, it's coming, stop it. And the
Titans like to play a nickel.
Stop it at all.
That makes it even more difficult when you have bigger bodies coming at you.
And you have Ben Sinnott, who, again, in the Juszczyk mold, is also a receiver. So if you go play action or if you do a chip release or whatever it is, you have a receiving option in Ben Sinnott as well. So you also mentioned the Detroit Lions. That's actually, I'm really happy you did that too, because I actually watched the Detroit Lions defense against this Tennessee Titans offense. That information that I got from there is actually be coming out in my Friday episode. So Commanders fans will get to do that. But yeah, we're clearly on the same page on which teams kind of present some of the better options against the Tennessee Titans team. And again, the thing you want the Commanders to do better than the Detroit Lions did, even though they were effective in some other areas, is stop the explosive passes.
Yeah, 100%. The Titans did a good job of getting Calvin Ridley going with the man coverage because he's so fast. It's just difficult to stay with him one-on-one, but will be very interesting to see that. I think you're saying Terry McLaurin getting across the field. The Titans run a lot of cover 4 man where they're manned on the outside, and then their safeties are playing that exchange cover 4 over the middle to stop those crossing routes. So this is going to be an excellent schematic battle, David.
Both Tyler and David are great. Check them out. Tyler, Locked On Titans. David, Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Houston Texans, they need to find something over these next couple of weeks. Obviously, they still lead the AFC South, but they have not looked like a playoff team this season, and they're going to face an AFC South rival in the Jacksonville Jaguars, who really don't look like one because they are not. Turmoil in Jacksonville all season. Big Sarge of Locked On Texans and Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars take you through who wants to win this game and who's going to take it.
All right, Big Sarge, it's time for keys to victory. Since you're the guest of honor, you go first. What are the keys to victory for the Texans to win like you already done told me they're going to win?
Hey, man, listen, I know that I'm just saying I'm just excited to see this Houston Texans team get a victory and head into the bye week. This is a divisional game, and this is the very first time I've ever seen DeMeco Ryans take a loss this hard. Like he even said it on a show that, you know, this one is hard to get over as far as the loss that they had against the Tennessee Titans. That's a team that they're not supposed to lose to, and every player in that locker room. Plus, I mean, the Texans just really don't. The Texans players don't like the other teams in their division. Like they really just they don't. And Joe Mixon, now that he's here, he really does not. And so with the opportunity for them to be able to get back on track, get themselves back on track, have that good feeling going into the bye week, and establish that dominance, get that dominance back, and go ahead and get another step closer to the AFC South. I mean, listen, I know that those games between the Jags, they're dog fights, but the key to victory, the main key is Will Hunt, Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Tell Trevor Lawrence he may not be able to plant.
I know it. Yeah, you're right. I'm afraid of that. They do a pretty good job of getting rid of that ball. You know, he has that non-throwing shoulder injury in that AC joint. You got these big old Lawrence Taylor shoulder pads on, so I know they're going to be careful with him. But the thing for me with Trevor is, he can get out of trouble. He kind of gets on my nerves a little bit when he reverses out over his left shoulder.
That's a problem for me because now you not only reduce the field to half the field, you reduced your vision to have. You got to reset your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas usually if he opens up and bails, he can still be looking down the field. So that that's a habit that he needs to break a little bit. I think the key to beating the Jaguars is to run the football.
Yeah,
that's it. And if you're gonna be stubborn and think that okay, their safeties aren't playing well this year, I'm gonna try them. Then you got to deal with Trayvon Walker, and then you got to deal with an occasional blitz from somebody. And then you got to deal with Joshua Hines-Allen because y'all offensive line ain't playing that great either. And so the key is I hope for y'all's sake that Slowick doesn't get caught up and happy with trying to let CJ get off now that Nico is finally back.
Mm-hmm.
The key to beating Jacksonville, you got to bust them in their face in the middle and the interior. And once everybody starts coming up, that's when you can start hitting your running backs and your tight ends and occasionally a wide receiver. But with Jacksonville, you almost have to beat them the way the Dallas Cowboys under Jimmy Johnson in the 90s beat people. That's their Achilles, to out-tough them because they have gotten smoked in games with Detroit and Buffalo, and all they did was just punch them right in the stomach. So that is something the Jaguars don't want to see. And I don't think they're going to see it. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to win. I think Jacksonville going to beat y'all. And the reason why I think that is because this is exactly the kind of game that they always win that makes you scratch your head and go, why the hell they can't do that against a sorry team? So Trevor's been out. He's had 3 weeks off. They look terrible without him. Everybody wants him back. Those players, they're gonna puff up. They're gonna get popcorn up like we got our dog back. And then I think they see a window of opportunity to kind of try to create the same magic they created before. Part of it is I think they believe that Houston is their toughest game for the rest of the season, and they got 6. And if they win all of those, I think they peeked over at the way the Titans were playing. I mean, the Texans were playing, and I think they looked at that schedule. And they said, okay, if they go 1-4 the rest of the way, and we win out, we win the tiebreaker. That leaves us all 8-9. And we win the tiebreaker because we're 5-1 in the division. The Jaguars have only played 2 division games. 4 of the next 6 games are against 2 of them against Tennessee, 1 against the Colts, and 1 of them here Sunday. And this is the one that is the hardest one, and that's why I think they're gonna win. Sorry. Wait, 2 things. One, we're coming up on Christmas here pretty soon, right?
Yep.
And you know what they say, right? If and buts was candy and nuts, the world would be a happy place, right? Christmas time would be so much better, right? And 2, you're a veteran, correct? You served, right?
Yes.
Thank you for your service. But I also need to give you the PTSD hotline because you're suffering. you're suffering from PTSD right now, or you're going through some type of mental health experience. And listen, I understand. I suffer from them too. So because if you think that the Houston Texans ain't gonna win another game for the rest of the season.
No, they can win 1. They can win 1. If we beat them, they can win 1. Even if they win 1, that gives them 8 wins.
Okay, so let's just talk about this one. No, Trevor Lawrence can peel out, and guess what he's gonna run into? Danielle Hunter. Peel out the other way. You're gonna run into Will Anderson. Okay, so you bought the time. So how you gonna beat Derek Stingley? Kamari Lassiter is on the other side, and he's a dog. And you got a linebacker in the middle that knows your plays better than Trevor Lawrence knows his own plays. Okay, on the offense side of the ball, Nico hungry, Joe Mixon hungry, Tank Dell hungry. So Bobby, especially with the way that he's been getting grilled, and we grilled him this week, and anytime CJ is on the field, I believe that the Houston Texans will not lose a game no matter who they play in, because although they had that epic collapse against the Detroit Lions, they still had the Detroit Lions 23-7 at the half, the best team in football that, if I'm not mistaken, the last time y'all played them, y'all lost 52-6.
Yeah, all of that. All of that's good. So let me pull some stuff out. I got that number to that hotline, by the way. I probably call it once a month. You know that. So I don't need your help with that hotline, but I tell you this. I do need you to tell me the last time I saw you whooping up on somebody like that on social media, that was Peter Bukowski. Yeah. And then later on that week, CJ Stroud had the worst game he ever had. So
I'm gonna go read those tweets with Peter McCall. Matter of fact, I'm gonna call Peter as soon as we get off. I said, he did it to me. The Sarge just tried to talk me down like I'm gonna just sit here. I was right about that game. They lost that game because time management from the coach. But that boy had the worst game he ever had up there now. And that's what it was. He was questioning how good CJ was. And CJ went up there, and you should have saw. I know you saw those tweets. He was tweeting the whole time, man. He was going off. Oh, wow. I was like, man, you need to stop. I told him one time, I said, you need to leave Sarge alone, man. But
I don't care nothing about Peter. He know that I said that. He know that I was right. Listen, hold on, Wig. Wait, let me move. You see this? I am married to a Green Bay Packers fan. I know the Packers better than Peter do.
Be sure to check out Big Sarge over at Locked On Texans and Tony over at Locked On Jaguars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding out the 1 p.m. slate, pretty storied rivalry in the Indianapolis Colts and New England Patriots. Well, Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots take you through this version of what the rivalry looks like and who could come out on top.
Patriots fans and Colts fans, once again, we are crossing the streams here on Crossover Thanksgiving Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots, Jake Arthur, one half of the hosting tandem of Locked On Colts. And Jake, as the late, great Gorilla Monsoon would say if this were WrestleMania, the time for the talk is just about over, my friend. If the Colts are to come into New England and earn the victory, defeat the Patriots, remain in the playoff race, what would you say are Indy's keys to victory?
Yeah, so last week against, for my money, the best team in the league, the Lions, the Colts did an awesome job of beating themselves. Not to say that they could have beat the Lions, but they could have made it a lot more interesting than it wound up being. I'll tell you a scary story real quick in several parts. All right, so I mentioned the blocking was bad. There was problems with discipline and everything. The offense last week only had 2 players with a pass blocking grade considered above average. Everyone else awful. Run blocking was worse. They only had 1 guy with really a passable grade in run blocking. This according to PFF. In terms of receiving, I mentioned, they'd been dropping the ball. There was miscommunications and everything. They had 3 guys, Kylan Granson, Ashton Dulin, and Drew Ogletree, all with grades below 50. Essentially last week, if you weren't Michael Pittman Jr. or Josh Downs, you weren't contributing. It was ugly there. And then you mentioned the Patriots had 10 penalties last week. So did the Colts. 8 of them on offense. A lot of pre-snap stuff as well. Really uncharacteristic. Like Quentin Nelson, for example, not been having a good time. And then defensively, missed tackles were a big problem. They had 15 of them, which led to 175 yards after the catch for Detroit and 110 yards rushing after contact. So I say all that to say this, it cannot get much worse. If there's so much that they did to themselves last week, and it's very uncharacteristic, maybe not the missed tackles, but like a lot of the penalties and everything, they wiped out about 96, 97 yards from gains because of penalties. So if you just clean any of that up, like you'll be fine. So I think defensively, if they go ahead and attack, I think the push that the Colts defensive line is going to be able to get will really help the linebackers, EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin, look like them old selves. They've been part of the problem when it comes to the middle of the Colts defense getting gashed. So I like the Colts defensive front to help the entire front 7 get back on track. And then offensively, I think the Colts are going to be a little more efficient. I am interested to see if A.D. Mitchell getting into the lineup in case Josh Downs can't go, if that helps make things more explosive. Again, I mentioned the Colts really, really want to get the run game going. They have 2 guys who can do it, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to have some faith that they get some things figured out and clean up some of the self-inflicted wounds. But, O-line play, just play normally. Again, I think they're probably going to make a switch at right guard this week. Catch the ball and be where you're supposed to be in running your routes. And then just make tackles on defense. Like, this sounds like I'm a high school coach grilling these things into my players, but this is an NFL team having these fundamental problems right now. But you just clean up those things that every coach will tell you have to master, and I think you're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel the same way. It is a professional football team, but yet we constantly talk about the fundamentals not being performed well on the field and essentially not being executed. And it leads to bigger problems on the field for both teams. And you're going to hear me talk about that with the New England Patriots in just a moment, because that is one of my keys to victory for the Pats: clean up the intangibles. But I think if New England is going to have any hope of being able to beat Indy this weekend and come in and play spoiler, I think on offense, they need to establish the run. And I think a lot of people will look at this team and say, well, with Drake May under center, you really need to air the ball out and the run needs to be more complementary. But when an Alex Van Pelt offense is working at its best, that running game, that outside zone running game, is facilitating everything you're doing in the play action game. It's allowing Drake to take shots down the field. It's giving him the room to be able to go off script and make plays when things go awry. And it's also giving him the opportunity to use the intermediate areas of the field to hit for short yardage gains. If the Patriots are working on all cylinders, that running game is working. So that's going to be key one for the Pats. Establish the run early. Try to put Indy on its heels. If they can do that, they have a chance to keep this game close, and I think it'll be manageable. The second key for the Pats, and we talked a little bit about this in the previous segment, is trying to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mentioned that the Patriots are most comfortable in man coverage schemes, and I expressed a little bit of concern as to whether or not the Patriots would even be able to defend that, because they had so many problems against the Rams just a couple of weeks ago. I understand that Indy doesn't put as much motion into their offense as the Rams do, but they have an army of great blocking receivers, and for a play caller as gifted as Shane Steichen, who's someone who will adapt to what his opponent does not do well and try to use it against them, I worry about the New England Patriots' ability to play in that, to really essentially be able to play through that, because I think that's going to be very difficult for the Pats to adjust. They haven't shown an ability to do it yet. Coaching staff is going to have to be much more alert and aware of what their opponents are doing to give them a puncher's chance. And finally, Jake, again, I end with cleaning up the intangibles. New England Patriots are too futile on third down. They only converted 3 of 14 attempts last week. Again, I come back to the 10 penalties, lack of communication in the field, not a lot of continuity that you're seeing on this defense, and it's leading to big plays and gash plays against this club that's putting them in holes early. If the Pats are even thinking about trying to pull the upset, all those intangibles have to be much better. If they're average or below average on any of those, Indy walks away with the win, and I don't have a doubt about that.
I like it. The Colts really need to win. I mean, they're in the playoff hunt right now only because the rest of the AFC is a logjam, and there's only a few teams that really seem to want to be in the playoffs, it seems. So that's why they're still alive. Like every time the Colts lose, it feels like the Texans do as well. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the games where you cannot afford to lose. Like they have 5 more games remaining, and there's only one of them that's against a team that probably should beat them, and that's the Broncos. The rest of these, the Colts are facing cellar-dwelling teams, so they cannot afford to lose a game like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see if that carries over into Sunday. Will the New England Patriots take throwback weekend here in Foxborough and make it a good time for the New England Patriots fans that will be up to see this team play on Thanksgiving weekend on Sunday? Or will the Indianapolis Colts come in, hold court, and remain very much alive in their pursuit of a playoff spot for the 2024 season?
Check out Jake over at Locked On Colts. Check out Mike over at Locked On Patriots, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's it for the 1 p.m. slate, but not it for us on the Ultimate NFL pregame show, because we still have a lot to get to. 4 o'clock games. We're diving into prime time as well. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Tons to get to on the show. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats with live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. So for this Ravens and Eagles game coming up, Ravens open up as 3-point home favorite. So if you like the Ravens, if you like the Eagles, be sure to pick your side over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Who wins the game of the week between the Baltimore Ravens and Philadelphia Eagles in week 13. I'm Kevin Allstriker. This is the Ultimate NFL pregame show where we get you ready for Sunday's action with the help of our local experts here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We have a lot of 4:25 p.m. action here for you, starting off with the game of the week. The Baltimore Ravens, Philadelphia Eagles. You got Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, plenty of star power in this one. So myself, Kevin Allstriker, the host of Locked On Ravens, and Louis DiBiase, one of the hosts of Locked On Eagles, take you through everything you need to know leading up to Sunday's big game, plus a little Thanksgiving conversation on the side. Back here on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles, Thanksgiving style crossover Thursday. Kevin Allstriker, Louis DiBiase still chopping it up with you here. Just a reminder, today's crossover Thursday between Locked On Ravens and Locked On Eagles is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Louis, let's get into some keys to victory here because I think both these teams have paths to win and they have paths to lose. So let's start off with you and Philadelphia side of things. What are 3 things Philly has to do to make sure they get the job done on Sunday against Baltimore?
Yeah, it's something they've been doing a really good job of. It's staying in the positive zone of the turnover differential. If you're going to give Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry short fields, that's going to be tough for a good Eagles defense, but for them to hang on in that situation, that's tough. This is already a really difficult offense to defend. You're going to be limited right now with, or I should say thin, when it comes to your defensive line. Brandon Graham out for the year. Bryce Huff still has 3 weeks left on the short-term IR before he can come back to the 53. So I think just don't put the defense behind the 8 ball. I would also say be balanced. I want to see them more balanced on offense. Attack this Ravens secondary, which, again, of all things on that roster, is probably the weaker unit when it comes to run offense, run defense, pass defense. And then the other thing I would say is for the Eagles, what I was saying earlier, don't let, and it's hard to say this because he's the greatest mobile quarterback of all time, but don't limit Lamar Jackson making plays outside of structure. Like when you get pressure, you got to find a way to get this guy down. Maybe you have a spy on him with Nakobe Dean or Zach Bond, but if the explosive plays come when he gets outside the numbers, that's when magic can happen. So I know that's a difficult ask because it is Lamar Jackson, but you got to try to find a way to limit him when it comes to the scramble drill.
Yeah, I always say there's so many steps to try to actually get Lamar Jackson down because usually it's just get pressure, sack quarterback.
Yeah,
with Lamar Jackson, it's get pressure and then find a way to not look like you are a high school JV player by Lamar Jackson juking you out of your shoes. And that's just the difficulty. But it's so hard because also when you blitz him, he's solved that. That used to be a weakness. That is now solved. If you blitz him, it's really difficult to stop that. If you don't get pressure when you don't rush guys, he can sit back in that pocket and tear you apart. So it's true where when he gets out of the pocket and he can have his receivers work back to him, or now he's drawing pass interference penalties because it's so hard to cover when Lamar's just jogging out there, seeing what's available. You're going to have to rip a guy or hold a guy to make sure they don't separate from you. So he's like the Torrey Smith of the Ravens of drawing those big pass interference penalties. Now, for the Ravens side of things, 3 things that I think Baltimore needs to do is, 1, they have to clean up on the penalties. I mean, it's getting ridiculous at this point. They're the highest penalized team in the league. They're the only team with triple-digit penalties this year with 101. They average 8.5 per game, which is a lot. Usually the saying is what you can't win with more than 6, and here they are at 8-4, and they're averaging 8.5. So they were able to get the job done with 9 on Monday night. They had 12 the previous week in Pittsburgh and lost. The thing with the penalties is it sets you back. They did a better job of not having that be a thing on Monday night where it wasn't stalling out drives or anything. But they've had many times where they get a nice 8-yard run from Derrick Henry on first down. No, sorry, holding. Instead of 2nd and 2, it's 1st and 20. And that just it kills you. It's brutal. So just don't make those self-inflicted mistakes. And as a lot of people have said, the Ravens' biggest opponent sometimes is themselves. If someone beats you, have it be the Eagles. Have the Eagles go out there and earn that win.
Yeah.
Don't give the game to Philadelphia. Second, I mean, this is an easy one, right? Limit, like you said, Saquon Barkley. I don't think you can necessarily stop him. I think he's too good of a player. But the Ravens could potentially be getting Michael Pierce back on Sunday, which would be a really big boost to their run defense. He's been out with a calf injury on IR for the past month or so. So he'd be a big boost to them. But you can't get washed out in the second level. You can't let Saquon get going. And then also trying to stop him as a receiver, which Baltimore has had trouble. defending running backs and tight ends out of the backfield at times. So you have to be able, whether it's Roquan Smith in there or not, trying to defend Saquon and limit his damage. And essentially, again, make someone else beat you. Even if it's AJ Brown, just make someone else beat you. I think you're more confident and comfortable in that, or at least you accept that more because you know Saquon's going to be the focal point of that offense. And finally, for Baltimore on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's just being able to block effectively. You know, even though, Louis, you mentioned Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff both not being in, the Eagles still have no shortage of good pass rushers, especially on the interior. Their interior presence, they have, I mean, I can't, we'd be here all day if we were to go into a scouting report on all these guys because they have so many of them. We talked about Milton Williams before the show. Obviously, they have a bunch of other players as well. They can generate really quality interior pressure on Lamar. It's not the be-all, end-all. If you get pressure on Lamar, like we talked about, he can escape and make things happen. But he is at his best when he can sit back there in a clean pocket and throw the ball. If he can get out of the pocket, he's still great at doing that. But if you can block effectively, that to me is the really, really big key here, at least for the Ravens side of things.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it for both sides is maybe try to like suffocate these quarterbacks and push them up the pocket because when they get outside of the numbers, like Jalen, like Lamar Jackson this year, has been very good passing on the run and making explosive plays happen when it's not the design play. So again, it's not an easy task to stop Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. I think for defenses, it's both of these defenses really just about limiting those guys. And it might come down, Kevin, this feels like a game where it's going to come down to maybe whoever has the ball last. I think it's going to be a close game in the fourth quarter for sure.
Yeah, I would not be shocked. And then you have two who were, you know, Tucker's the greatest kicker of all time. Jake Elliott's had a really solid career, but two guys who have certainly had their fair share of struggles this year.
Struggled this year, for sure.
You know, I don't know. It could be maybe a revenge game for either one of those guys potentially. Tucker was good on Monday night, but man, kickers this year, it's just been a weird kicker year, just across the league in general. I don't even know what to make of it. Now, on the Ravens injury side of things, 3 players didn't practice for them. Charlie Kohler he broke his arm. He's going to be on IR. He's not going to play in this game at all. Arthur Millette has not practiced with a calf or knee injury for the last couple of weeks now. And then Kyle Van Noy, hamstring, neck. He did not practice. Roquan Smith returned after missing last week. Travis Jones, Sanusi Kane, and I mentioned Michael Pierce. They're all also back at practice. So Ravens decently healthy, not fully healthy, obviously, but decently healthy. Is Philadelphia looking okay injury-wise, or what's their situation?
Yeah, pretty much for the most part, they're healthy. I would say there's 2 guys to keep a close eye on. 2 guys did not practice today, one on offense and one on defense. That's noteworthy. Devontae Smith did not practice, still dealing with that hamstring injury that kept him out of Sunday's game against the Rams. He's been dealing with that for about a month now. It's why even when he was playing after that Jaguars game, he's been pretty limited. So Devontae, we'll see if he can get back to practice tomorrow, Friday. Might be a game-time decision there. Darius Slay still in concussion protocol. He did not practice today, so got Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, but it could be Isaiah Rodgers on Sunday instead of Slay. Slay's been in and out of the lineup a lot this year, so those are the 2 guys I'm watching the most is Slay and Smitty to see if what their status will be. We'll probably know a little bit more on, I would say Friday, we'll have a good idea if they're going to play.
Yeah, that's usually the sweet spot.
Yeah.
And, you know, at least for the Ravens side of things, they like to be very to the vest with their injuries. They don't like a lot of spoilers. Yep. They like any competitive advantage that they can get. So maybe not a ton of news, especially for the maybe game time decision players, but we'll see how it goes. Now, let's do it, Lou. Let's talk about these Thanksgiving sides. All right, give me 3. Top 3 Thanksgiving sides.
So I can only load up my plate with 3. That's tough because it's all about the sides for me. I'm not a turkey guy.
Okay,
I'm anti-turkey. If I'm going to eat turkey, I want the dark meat. I want the leg or the
all right,
wing.
hey, I'm with it.
So it's all about sides for me. If I had to go 3, number 1 is green bean casserole. You get those French onion crusties over top too. I know that's not a super popular first one.
Yeah.
Number 2, and this is specific, stuffing, but it has to be stovetop. I'm not a stuffing guy that you put in the turkey. I don't like it soggy. I like a little crisp. I feel like the stovetop does it better.
Yeah.
And then number 3, like just the classic. Like give me a mashed potato and gravy. But I'm not one. Can I tell you one that I will never put on my plate?
All right, what?
Cranberry sauce, especially in patty.
Yeah,
form.
I'm not.
Disgusting. I can't stand it. Like the marshmallow yams and those too. Like I don't want dessert on my plate during the Thanksgiving meal. That's for afterwards. And I feel like some of those sides are, I think, just a little bit too ambitious for me.
Well, the thing with the cranberry sauce is sometimes when you get like the canned one, it looks like a can of dog food, and you're like,
yeah,
I don't want to.
Disgusting.
You're
You
like,
know,
I
people
don't.
just eating that straight up. I would get it if you're like spreading it on a biscuit or something. with some
If
butter.
you're prepping it,
If you're using it like a jam,
Yes.
that makes sense. But some people just eat it like a monster, like just the patty itself, just eating it with a fork, and it's, I don't know, it's very unappealing to me.
no, yeah, I'm not a cranberry guy either. Number one for me, I gotta go mac and cheese. I know
an
it's
honorable mention. I like mac
it's
and
very
cheese.
controversial for some people whether it actually is a side or not. I know some people
It's
say
not,
yes,
my
some people
family
say
never
no.
used to do it. I'm
Yeah.
finally starting to implement it.
Right, and you gotta get the breadcrumbs on top.
Oh,
You
you
got
have
the multi cheese. Like you gotta have
Mhm.
all that. Number
course.
two, I'm going exactly you. I'm going stuffing, and if I had
Yep.
to specify, I'm with you where I don't want
Yeah.
it like any turkey stuff. Like I'm just give me
Nah.
it plain.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. Number three, I'm going bland. I'm just going a plain old buttered roll. Give me
Yeah.
the buttered rolls.
No
I mean,
Hawaiian roll? Is it a specific kind of roll, or what are we talking here? Just a dinner roll?
I'm not too picky. I think the dinner
Right.
rolls are what I'll go with. I'm
So
not.
we
I'm not too
implement
picky.
with the dinner roll. We do a honey butter. That's pretty solid too.
Oh, that sounds.
So it's
that
almost like a
sounds
cinnamon
good.
sugar honey butter over top.
Yeah,
I'm
I
with
went
you.
somewhere. Oh, I went somewhere one year where it was truffle butter, and that was nuts.
The rolls, I again, if it's top 5, they would probably be in there for me too.
Yeah.
So I don't hate that. That's a good
Yeah.
ranking. It's Thanksgiving. Again, it's all about the sides.
Very, very underrated, and I'm sure. Look, there are plenty of other sides we could talk about. We could have this conversation
Oh,
for
yeah, I was gonna say,
hours.
don't get me
I'm
started.
sure. Yeah, 100%. If you want more Ravens content, check me out over at Locked On Ravens. If you want more Eagles content, check Louie out over at Locked On Eagles, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A big NFC South matchup up next. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to look to continue their strong play against the Carolina Panthers, who almost upset the Kansas City Chiefs last week, but could not get the job done. James Jericho, Locked On Bucks. Julian Council, Locked On Panthers, have key storylines and so much more, and everything you need to know for the game.
Welcome back to this Locked On NFL Crossover Thursday edition, brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app and use code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. He is James Yarko, the host of Locked On Bucks. It is a big game in the NFC South this Sunday, 4:05 Eastern time, inside Bank of America Stadium. The Falcons are sitting at 6-5, and they're facing off against the Chargers on Sunday. I think they're going to lose that game. Tampa sitting at 5-6, one game back of a team that has a tiebreaker over them. Carolina sitting at 3-8. There is opportunity abound for both these teams in the final 6 weeks of the season if they can win out, potentially. Certainly for Tampa, you win out, you're going to win the division. But for Carolina, not much margin for error for them. They would likely need to go 9-8 in order to win this division. Big divisional round game, and you did not expect that to happen December 1st between, I think, at least for Carolina. I didn't think they'd be in a game at this point in time based on how things were going earlier this season. But they're in it, James, and there are 3 things that the Bucs must do, the 3 things that the Panthers must do. What are the 3 things that Tampa must do in order to come out on top and get back to 500 and have a chance to possibly be in first place in the NFC South come Sunday evening?
They have to dominate in the run game. They have to keep the pressure high, and they cannot beat themselves. I talked about it at the top of the show, Bucky Irving and his explosive game against the Giants. The Giants were the worst team in the NFL in allowing 25-plus yard runs this season. The Carolina Panthers dead last in yards allowed on the ground per game at 160. The Bucs are 10th in the NFL in running the ball, averaging 128 yards. This is going to be another Bucky Irving game. He is going to set the tone early. You're going to have Rashad playing his role. You're going to have Sean Tucker playing his role, but this is going to be Bucky Irving setting the tone. The first guy that gets to him is not going to take him down. He had 87 rushing yards last week against the Giants. He had 89 rushing yards after contact. The first guy is not taking him down. So he's a slippery, quick dude, and he's going to infuriate some Panthers fans. But when you're going up against the worst rushing defense in the NFL and you have one of the most electric running backs, emerging, you have to utilize him and you have to control the clock, especially on the road. Take that crowd out of it early. Keeping the pressure high. They beat the snot out of Tommy DeVito last week. 4 sacks. He was constantly on the ground. I thought at one point Kalijah Cansey had cracked his ribs all the way through to come out the
Ugh.
other side of his body. Treat Bryce Young the way you treated Tommy DeVito and the way you've treated Jalen Hurts the last 3 times that you faced the Eagles. Continuously knock him around. That dude has gotten way too comfortable in the pocket over the last couple of weeks to the point that he is resembling a quarterback that I cannot make fun of on my show anymore. That needs to stop right now. So knock him around, take him to the ground. Vita, Kalijah, Yaya Diaby, Antoine Winfield Jr., Levante David, all these guys bring the pressure all day and really put the Panthers behind the sticks. And then don't beat yourselves. This is a football team that the Buccaneers should beat. Do not shoot yourselves in the foot with turnovers, with stupid penalties, with negating first downs, with holding calls, giving free first downs with defensive holdings and pass interferences and roughing the passers and all that stupid stuff that teams do and then end up losing against a team that they should beat. That's it for the Bucs. Yeah, I think the familiarity with Canales is canceled out with his familiarity with Bowles. I don't think any team gets an advantage there. So just go out and may the better team win.
Yeah, the Panthers have not been a great run defense. You have that correct this season. In recent weeks, they have been better, even though they're still giving up 100 yards rushing every single week. They've been better in terms of like tackling. And you look at some of like the yards per attempt in these games, like Denver, they ran for like 130, but it's not like Javonte Williams or McLaughlin, I think, is the other running back there. It's not like they were breaking out any big runs. Even last week, there wasn't a ton of big runs either for Kansas City, and in the Giants, same kind of case. So they done a better job, at least, of making their opponents work for more of those yardages, but they're still giving up those yardages. And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out on Sunday against Bucky Irving, who I love them at Oregon, and it's cool to see him have success. I guess I wish it wasn't against Tampa Bay, but whatever. It is what it is. He's a good player. It was bound to happen eventually. And then, like you talk about, too, on the other side of the ball, like Carolina, they went to work with the offensive line this offseason, trying to rework that, signing Robert Hunt to a $100 million deal, Damian Lewis to a $69 million deal, bringing Austin Corbett, moving him to center, and they've only given up 20 sacks so far this year, after giving up 62, I think, last year, 65. It was something absurd. So that has been improved, and they have not necessarily had one of those games where they have looked like they are completely outflanked and have no idea who to block. Now, when blitzes have come, sometimes they have not had the best communication at certain times, and I know Todd Bowles likes a blitz, so we'll see if that will be the case on Sunday in this game. As far as Carolina goes, I mean, you talk about it, familiarity. Maybe it cancels itself out, but if it doesn't, like, Dave Canales has got to find a way to win the battle of familiarity against Todd Bowles, who hired him last year and sat there and watched his offense. And there was a comment made this offseason by Savasier Dennis, the linebacker there in Tampa, saying that Dave Canales' offense is a little blasé, that there wasn't a lot of motion and movement, kind of like what Liam Cohen does. So I wonder, I don't think Dave Canales is one of those guys that's going to take that personally, but possibly he thinks about that, and maybe he's asked about it depending on the result of the game on Sunday. So we'll see if he can win that battle of familiarity with the defensive coaching staff, but also the defensive players who went up against his offense a year ago. Number 2, they got to finish in the red zone. If they did that last week, James, I think they beat Kansas City. They were 2 for 6 in the red zone. Now, KC was only 2 for 5, but still, Carolina moved the ball down the field all day long on that Chiefs offense. I can only recall, I think, 1, maybe 2 3-and-outs, which, as we talked about earlier, that is customary for a Dave Canales offense at some point in time in the game. But they were able to get the ball up and down the field for the most part. The Panthers are 10th in the NFL in red zone touchdown scoring percentage, which I actually was surprised to see. Tampa is 16th defensively in the red zone. So Carolina, been a better red zone offense, and the Bucs have been a better red zone defense, not by a wide margin, but certainly that's an area where if they want to win this game, they got to capitalize. If you look at the game they played in week 4 against Cincinnati at home, had to capitalize in the red zone to start that game. Maybe they win that game as well. So got to end drives when you get there. You got to finish, something that Dave Canales said on Sunday after that game. And number 3, Bryce Young's got to continue to progress. He has played his best football in 3 consecutive weeks as a Carolina Panther. Thought he played well against the Saints. His numbers weren't great against New York, but he made some timely throws, helped them win that game, put him in position, of course, to win that. And then last week, I felt like that was the best performance he has ever had. Statistically, it was last year against Green Bay. But looking at the opponent, the defense, Spagnuolo, all of it, I thought that was the best performance that we've seen out of Bryce Young. And now he's going up against a team that has had, as you said, those defensive struggles, some injuries there in the secondary. Let's see. He's not going to have Jalen Coker, the rookie wide receiver, is going to miss his second week in a row. He's not going to have JT Sanders, his rookie tight end. He's got to lean on Adam Thielen, got to lean on Xavier Legette and David Moore, who had a really good game last week. And he was there last year in Tampa. So we'll see if they can do that. So got to win the battle of familiarity, finish in the red zone, and Bryce Young needs to keep doing what he's been doing the last couple of weeks if they're going to win this game on Sunday. Any final thoughts from the Bucs perspective of things heading into this game?
Bold prediction. Whoever wins this game finishes ahead of the Falcons in the NFC South.
Oh, okay. So Carolina still has one more game left against Atlanta. So that is certainly positive because they win this, they go to 4-8. If they beat Atlanta, that probably brings them within like another game right there. I like that.
Go ahead and check mark Panthers over the Falcons. That's a dub.
They're like Carolina's sitting here where it's Tampa twice over the next 6 weeks. That's a playoff contender. They got Philadelphia next week, who they're going to win their division again. They have Arizona as well. The only respite is the Dallas Cowboys, if you want to call that a respite after they just went out there and beat the Commanders on Sunday. So Carolina's going to be grinding to get to that.
That's a division game. You got to throw out the records in division games. That's why we're talking about how both of these teams are still in the playoff race now because the Falcons are falconing. But yeah, I mean, the Cowboys are terrible. I'm so glad that the Bucs get to face them in Jerry World on primetime.
Oh boy,
that's gonna be hilarious.
Will that be the latest Dallas beatdown there at home? Because those happen seemingly every time they play at AT&T Stadium.
I probably, but I think that's the weekend after Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they find a curtain so that their receiver doesn't get blinded by the sun. We'll see if Jerry's figured that one out just yet.
Check out James over at Locked On Bucks. Check out Julian over at Locked On Panthers, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Only 3 4:00 games this weekend. And the last one we're going to talk about, Los Angeles Rams and New Orleans Saints, 2 NFC teams. The Saints 2-0 under the new interim head coach. And the Rams, they're looking to continue to get something on the team that really struggled with injuries at the beginning of the season and really weathered that storm decently well. I'm looking to continue getting some momentum, hopefully. So you have Travis Rogers of Locked On Rams. You got Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints with matchups galore, keys to victory, and so much more on the game.
All right, y'all. It's Crossover Thursday here, Locked On Rams and Locked On Saints. Travis Rogers and Ross Jackson here breaking down this big matchup between the Los Angeles Rams traveling to the Big Easy to take on the New Orleans Saints this weekend. Now we're going to dive into the 3 things that each of these teams needs to do to get a win. Of course, our Crossover Thursdays are always presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. So, Travis, when it comes down to the things that the Rams need to do to get a win here in New Orleans, what do you think the game kind of starts off with for them? Like, what do they need to do to get a win?
This is the worst answer you're ever going to hear all season long. Here we are in week 13, and it's the dumbest, most obvious answer. What are the 3 things we talk about? Don't turn it over, block, and don't miss kicks.
I like the block edition.
I mean, it's just like this is not super complicated.
Right.
Kyren Williams has fumbled 5 times in the last 7 games. That can't can't continue.
That's big.
That's crazy. You know, that game against the Eagles got off to a weird start because he put it on the ground on their first series. They don't block anybody up front. That Matthew Stafford has very little time. And Josh Carty, who they spent a draft pick on and got off to a good start. I think Rams fans were pretty pleased. I know the everydayers were listening to Doug and I talk about him, the Carty party that was kind of being thrown at the early part of the season. And he was good. And it felt like he had some range out to maybe the low 50s that you felt pretty good. Well, that's not true anymore. He's missing more than he's making. So, call me a football genius. Don't turn it over, block, and make kicks. It's a pretty good formula to win a game.
It's got to be a big part of it, right? I mean, gosh, that's about it. That's about all it takes. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for tuning in. Look, and I think the Saints kind of path to winning is pretty simple as well. They got to be able to run the ball effectively. They've got to be able to get pressure on the opposing quarterback while keeping their quarterback clean. And they have to continue to win in the special teams battle. I think special teams, I'm glad that you brought up kicking. I think special teams is going to be big in this game. I don't know if you've seen, but there's some voodoo going on in the Superdome right now, Travis.
Okay.
There's 2 weeks ago, Younghoe Koo missed 3 kicks in the Superdome for the first time in his career. First time he ever missed 3 kicks in a game. And then last week, Dustin Hopkins missed another 3 kicks. One of them, 2 of them on the same drive, because one of them he missed the field goal. It got called for defensive holding on a field goal, which I'll never understand. First time I've ever seen that. But yeah, right. So then they got another couple of plays at the end of the half. And then in the greatest ball don't lie movement, Dustin Hopkins lines up for a shorter kick and misses the opposite direction. So it's been insane here. Meanwhile, Blake Grupe, the New Orleans Saints kicker, has been great here as of late. Maybe I shouldn't have said that out loud, but I think we've all said it anyway. But whatever special teams coordinator now turned interim head coach Darren Rizzi is doing, whatever gree he buried somewhere on the Superdome grounds, it's working against opposing kickers.
Yeah, the Rams are hanging on by the skin of their teeth with their special teams, because look, they brought back Chase Blackburn as their special teams coach, and I think everybody went, say what now? That he came back for another year, because they had the worst special teams in football last year. And you rarely does worst special teams in football and playoff team go hand in hand. And somehow, some way, they still made the playoffs despite having some really dreadful special teams performances. They kind of ran it back. They changed out some personnel. It's better, but it's not a lot better. So maybe that voodoo that you're talking about, that the Rams are kicking so squirrely right now, maybe it'll drive it through the uprights, because everybody's talking, they got to make these goalposts a little closer. It's getting too easy for these guys. Like, watch a Rams game. No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not easier for them.
I love that from the moment that suggestion became a hotly debated conversation, NFL kickers just completely did themselves in, have done themselves in week over week. Yeah, right. Yeah. They said, watch this. You think we need these skinnier? Give me a second. And they have been awful so far throughout the season, almost bad as the officiating. The other things that I think that we won't go there. It's all right. Wait. I will say this. This real quick. There's no reason that Nick Sirianni should have been able to change his mind after accepting that penalty. I've never seen that before.
I assumed, and apparently it isn't, I assumed there was a rule that once I say I want to do A, I don't get a look at the other guy's cards and then say, I changed my mind, I'd like to do B. I've never seen that happen. And
that was wild.
And again, that's not why the Rams lost the game. They lost the game because Saquon Barkley is superhuman. But
302 total yards. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Yeah, for anybody that maybe that didn't see it, there was I think it was a 3rd and 3 that ended up. There was a holding penalty on an incomplete pass, if I recall correctly. And Nick Sirianni declined the holding penalty, saw Sean McVay send the Rams offense back out to go for it on 4th and 3, and then said, never mind. And then accepted the penalty, and they allowed him to accept the penalty.
That's exactly right. And there's one other wrinkle to this that I feel necessary, because I've been thinking about it for days, and I can't quite come up with it. Why would he have thought they were going to kick it the first time? They were down 13 points. It's late in the fourth quarter. Like, what did you think they were going to do? That's the part that's like, and look, Eagles are good. Them and the Lions have kind of separated from the pack. But if I were an Eagles fan and saw that, I'm going, what is going through that dude's head? Like, there's no scenario in the world where the Rams were going to kick that field goal.
Nick Sirianni is presently the worst NFL coach of a winning team right now. I have no doubt in my mind. Anyway, sorry. This is not an Eagles podcast. If you want that, you can go check out Gino and Louie over at Locked On Eagles. They've got you taken care of. Yeah. Travis and I are we're just bonkers about football. But I think the other thing here is that, like, the Saints have got to run the football well, and I'm sure that goes just as important for the Los Angeles Rams as well. The Saints have been a weak run defense. The Rams have allowed over 151 rushing yards per game in away games, and are coming off of the game where Saquon Barkley just went nuts in SoFi and everything. So the Saints have to be able to try to take advantage of that as well. I do want to mention that, of course, is a huge part of this game, I'm sure, for both sides.
Yeah, for sure. I've been, and maybe if the Rams lose this game to the Saints, we'll get to see something that I've been calling for I don't want to say a few weeks, maybe a few months. Why do we draft Blake Corum in the 3rd round, never to use him? He really hasn't played much at all. Kyren Williams keeps fumbling. The Rams, it's not like Kyren Williams is a fumbler who also will rip off a bunch of 20 and 30-yard runs. That's
Right.
not the sort of back he is. He's kind of a grinded out sort of guy. And I don't think he's a bad player, but he's not an explosive player. Let's take a look at the other guy. Maybe it's the same and without the fumbles, and that would feel. I mean, I get it. There's pass pro and Matthew Stafford is all of those things, but the clock on Blake Corum has been ticking for a minute for me. I'd really like to see him play more.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a great acceleration on one of the runs that I saw from him on Sunday night up against the Eagles and things like that.
That was his only one.
I was like, why don't they give him the ball to this guy a little bit more?
They haven't all
You can see the
season.
juice. You
They
can
haven't
see
all
the
season.
juice.
They haven't
So
used him.
we'll see. We'll see if maybe he gets involved here up against New Orleans. And of course, the Saints themselves over on their side will have Alvin Kamara, of course, to be able to lean on as well, who is on track for his first 1,000-yard rushing season, which feels so weird to say. He's never had one. Isn't that crazy?
I would have gotten that big wrong. Wrong.
I never had 1,000-yard rushing season. But staring down at it now here in year almost 7, 8 at this point. So good for him. Good for him because he deserves it.
Check out Travis over at Locked On Rams, Ross over at Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That'll do it for the 4 p.m. slate of games. We still have the primetime action to get to. 2 really intriguing games we're going to talk about coming up next on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. First, the show is sponsored by Gametime. And again, football is incredible. I love going. I love watching it live. There's so many memories that I have, even from Ravens' perspective, 2006, even though this wasn't a great memory in terms of win-loss because Baltimore lost it for me, go into that Colts game in 2006, divisional round game, went there, and I always have memories of that with my grandfather, and it was an incredible time for me. Even though the Ravens lost, that part was not as incredible, but still, you love to have the memory. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out fluff to show you the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And Gametime has tickets for all events, concert shows, and more, not just sports. Ravens and Eagles. Big game. If you want to find tickets for that game in Baltimore, head over to Gametime. They have super deals and other tiers of deals. Plus, the Gametime app has so many features like Gametime Picks, seat views, lowest price guarantee, Gametime ticket coverage, and so much more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, spelled LOCKED on NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Rounding out the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show, I am Kevin Ostreicher, bringing you everything you need to know leading up to Week 13's NFL action. Talked about 1 p.m. games, talked about 4 p.m. games, prime time. Let's get into that. San Francisco 49ers absolutely destroyed by the Green Bay Packers last week. They're dealing with injuries, and there's all around a very disappointing year for San Francisco in general. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills coming off of their bye, looking to continue to climb the AFC standings. So Eric Crocker of Locked On 49ers, Joe Marino of Locked On Bills have what you need to know leading up to game time with key storylines, key matchups, and so much more.
Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by Eric Crocker, host of Locked On 49ers, here to get you ready for Sunday Night Football in Week 13, Bills, Niners. And it's time to talk about the keys to victory. If the 49ers are going to go across the country, Sunday Night Football, win in Highmark Stadium, get the upset, right? 6.5-point road dogs. Yeah, be a big win, 6-6. You feel like you're kind of in the position to do the thing we talked about earlier and go on a run. What's got to happen? What are the keys for the Niners?
I think the 49ers have to figure out a way to make the Buffalo Bills uncomfortable, as if the weather can't make them uncomfortable as well, right? 49ers have to add to that. Can you put certain pressure on Josh Allen and force him to throw some of those boneheaded throws that we haven't seen him really throw this year, but we've seen him throw in the past? Get him to turn the ball over a couple of times. Then the 49ers have to turn around, take advantage of that, and be able to run the ball. They have not ran the ball well since Christian McCaffrey has come back. And in turn, that's putting the 49ers in some tough situations, some longer situations, and they just don't play well in, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10. Most teams obviously get a little worse in those situations. I think the 49ers are probably one of the worst because they don't have these great passing concepts. Teams understand how to attack the 49ers. Teams know that if you get the 49ers in that position, they don't change a lot of the stuff they do up front. So if you send some blitzes, they're going to throw to their hot Teams are forcing them to throw to the hot guy right now, and teams are also rallying down and making tackles. So the 49ers, they got to get ahead of the sticks early in downs, and that's going to start with really being able to run the ball. Again, something they have not done very well since Christian McCaffrey has come back.
Crockett, it looks like we got a lot of similar thoughts here because my keys kind of align with what you're thinking for the 49ers side of things. Number one is I have written down, have the right plan to defend the run. And I know that you mentioned that the 49ers run game maybe not as dynamic as it's been, but the Bills run defense can be a little leaky. They play a ton of light boxes, man. They'll give you 6-man boxes all game long. They live in nickel, right? Taron Johnson, big-time slot corner, and he basically plays strong side linebacker for this team. And that's going to invite some runs. And the Bills want that. They want you to try to run the ball on them and tighten the screws in the red zone. Like, that's how they play defense. But you got to have the right plan because obviously, especially, if Brock Purdy's going to play and maybe that comes with some limitations with the shoulder. If he doesn't play and it's Allen again, they're going to run the ball, right? And so this Shanahan run scheme, the Bills play it all the time. They get the Dolphins a couple of times a year, right? They had LaFleur with the Jets for a little bit. They've seen this run scheme, and it gives them some troubles, man. The trap blocks, the whams, the misdirections, the horizontal stretch, it can give the Bills some problems. They can get creased a little bit. And so the Bills are going to have the right plan to defend the run. And maybe this is a week where you try to, roll that safety down and give your box a little bit more support if you're not as concerned with their ability to throw the football against you. Number two, on defense, you got to hunt the ball. The Niners are turning the ball over 12% of their drives. That's bottom 10 in the NFL. And the Bills are very good at taking away the football. They get a turnover or a takeaway 18% of the drives. They've had a takeaway in every single game this year. I think the streak's at like 14 or 15 games dating back to last year. They're a big play defense. And I know that the names are different in the secondary, but they still have that same mindset of going and taking away the football. And I think that'll be a big opportunity for them, not only to, obviously break on some balls where they have some really talented guys in terms of ball skills with Rasul Douglas, with Christian Benford, with Taron Johnson, with Terrell Bernard at linebacker, but they're good at forcing fumbles as well. And so I think they got to be hunting the football in this game and see if you can kind of use something that's been a strength for you and a weakness for them against the Niners in this game. And then on offense, I think this is about leaning into an efficient style of offense, which is how the Bills want to play. The Niners are a pretty good team metrically at defending vertical passes. They're not a very blitz aggressive team defensively. And so just take the profits, sit there and take the profits, rely on your yards after catch, run the football efficiently and stay ahead of the sticks. That way you don't put them in a position where they can, tee off, take advantage of some long and late downs and maybe, break on a pass and get a game-changing takeaway. So for me, it's have the right plan to defend the run, hunt the football, and be efficient on offense.
I think a lot of times we focus a lot on the offense, on the defense, and those phases of the game. But there's a third phase that's very important in special teams, and that's where the 49ers have not been very good.
31st in DVOA, Croc. What I was going to ask you about, what is going on with the Niners special teams, man?
Oh, man, I mean, they've been bad. So there's three phases of football, right? You got, offense, defense, special teams. And then within the special teams, you have a bunch of different phases, there as well. And I feel like at different times, the 49ers have just been bad at all of them. You have a really good punter with Mitch Wishnowsky, who he's been out a couple weeks now. We'll see if he's coming back. But even if he's not back, the punt unit, it's just been the coverage, not great. The 49ers have given up big returns in key moments. Sometimes it's bitten them in the butt. Sometimes it hasn't. The Rams beat the 49ers early in the year. A big part of that was 49ers punted it late in the game. The Rams returned it into their own territory, setting up a short field for them to be able to take the lead and beat the 49ers. The Seattle Seahawks, 49ers, they're kind of trying to run away with this game. They kick it off, and boom, there's a big return for a touchdown against the Niners. I mean, just at different times, the coverage unit has been bad. The 49ers have muffed a couple fumbles where you have a rookie back there, and maybe it's him, but it's not even his fault because his protector is getting pushed into his lap, where now he's getting distracted and the guy's hitting him and he's trying to catch the ball. I mean, any way that you can mess up special teams, the 49ers have done it, which leads you to the point or question, why is this special teams coordinator not fired yet with the 49ers being so bad right now? But in this type of weather where anything can kind of happen, you punt the ball, you can have a fumble, it can hit somebody, the ball's going to bounce a little funny in the snow or on the wet grounds. The 49ers have to be much better on special teams if they want to have a chance to beat the Buffalo Bills this Sunday.
Yeah, the weather can be a neutralizer. I mean, obviously the Bills might be a little bit more accustomed to being in those elements, but the ball's still slippery for the Bills, right? And so you could look at the weather as perhaps a bit of a neutralizer in this game if you start to see that type of stuff happen. And who knows, man? Weather in Western New York at this time of year changes. There's certainly snow in the forecast. Will it be snowing during the game? What does it look like to get there? What does it look like during? Hold your breath. We don't know what's going to happen, but it will be interesting nonetheless.
Be sure to check out Eric over at Locked On 49ers and Joe over at Locked On Bills, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Rounding things out, the Cleveland Browns, huge win against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 12. The Denver Broncos, Bo Nix has looked awesome this season. Sarah Benger of Locked On Broncos and Jeff Lloyd of Locked On Browns talk about who could take this matchup and so much more.
As we jump into the fourth quarter, we are going to break down our 3 keys to victory for the Denver Broncos and the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football, with Cleveland heading to the Mile High City. But once again, just want to shout out every one of you, everyday listeners of Locked On Broncos and Locked On Browns out there. We appreciate you so much for making us your first listen of the day every single day. Jeff, I want to pitch it over to you. 3 keys to victory for the Cleveland Browns in this game. I mean, they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, so they can beat the best of the best. What do they got to do to go into Denver and steal a win?
Well, it's got to start with some, some manipulation, manipulation of a running game. Look, I love Nick Chubb with all my heart, and he is out there. But when you've seen a player for as long as I've seen Nick Chubb, I can tell that that's a version of Nick Chubb. It's not the Nick Chubb. We'll see in 2025 if he gets back to 100% of Nick Chubb. It doesn't help that it's been a revolving door at the offensive line. That certainly gives you no cohesion towards a run game. But certainly the run game is certainly going to be important. Second one, I'll also stick here on offense as well. I probably don't have to tell you or any Denver Bronco fan, there's been times for Jerry Jeudy where his head gets the best of him and basically, defeats him. And Jerry Jeudy right now is in a really good spot. Moving on from Amari Cooper, I think it was such a smart move. Because look, once you're done with a guy and it's basically, look, we're not even willing to negotiate. We don't want to talk about a contract extension. There's that odd spot you're in. But meanwhile, the Browns had all these other guys who needed reps, who needed to kind of have, be established as to where they are so the Browns can make plans in the future. Jerry Jeudy was certainly one of them. Over the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's been an absolute monster. Who would have thought the kid who grew up in Deerfield Beach, Florida, all of a sudden looked like a guy who grew up in the lake in Minnesota on Thursday Night Football, catching everything that came his way in the snow. Cedric Tillman, there's been a big progressional jump there as well. Elijah Moore, it always seems that they don't know what to do with Elijah Moore, and then comes the second half of the season, and they just say, you know what, he's not a gadget player, he's a wide receiver, he's just smaller. So let's just start throwing the ball. And they throw him the ball and things work out for it. So, Jerry Jeudy keeping his head in a situation like this. First things first, you're going against a guy like Patrick Surtain, whose, resume is just obviously impeccable. And certainly Jerry knows of the abilities. The thing is to stay within yourself. And for Jerry, maybe the best thing that Jerry Jeudy can do for the Browns offense on Monday night is be a decoy, because what quarterback's going to really want to throw the ball at Patrick Surtain's way a lot? Most likely you don't. So run your routes well, preoccupy Mr. Surtain, and therefore you have guys, and we'll see again if it's Tillman, David Njoku, certainly Elijah Moore, and you can get other guys involved here, because if the Browns say, hey, we're willing to give up Jerry Jeudy to give up Patrick Surtain, you're going to do that, 9 times out of, 10 out of 10. And the third one, defense, it's just got to keep coming. And look, you are Jim Schwartz. You have this resume. You should be the one that makes Bo Nix look like a rookie. It shouldn't be Bo Nix having a day against a guy like you. That's more of a statement about maybe where Jim Schwartz would be in his career as for Bo Nix, because we know Bo Nix is trending towards being one of those guys. But if you're supposed to be one of these, guru, top notch, you should be ready to go against a rookie quarterback, even though we're getting to the point where, the rookie label starts to wash off a little bit after all the amount of times that he's played. But you need to have Bo Nix make a couple of mistakes. And as you said, they don't run the ball very well. So that should play into your hands of saying, well, all we want to do is play man coverage and get after the quarterback. Well, it appears Denver might let you do that. Now let's see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be another test for Bo Nix coming off a game where you play against Max Crosby. I know the Broncos won by 10 points against the Raiders, but Max Crosby really made life difficult for Sean Payton, for Bo Nix, forcing them to just really
He needs
adjust
to
their
get
game
out of
plan.
Las Vegas so bad.
I know. Get him out of there. I'm with you on that, Jeff. Get Max Crosby out of Las Vegas, and as long as he's not going to the Chargers or the Chiefs, I'm fine with him leaving Las Vegas at any point in the near future. So Myles Garrett, similar beast, a similar type of guy that you've got to account for every single play. You adjust your protection plan. You adjust everything that you do based on where he's lining up. And that's what the Broncos have to do. I mean, that's the number one overarching thing that they need to do to win this game. But my 3 keys to victory, Jeff, number 1, you need to avoid negative plays on the early downs. That's what got them into trouble against the Las Vegas Raiders consistently. Javonte Williams, negative run or a gain of just 1 yard. Too many negative plays on first downs, and then you have a good play maybe on second down, but it gets called back, or you have a penalty on first down. Got to avoid the negative plays on early downs, and that's where the running game really needs to step up. Number 2, you want to make Jameis Winston make mistakes. Obviously, I think a lot of these keys to victory every single week, they can be very similar, but you want to force the opposing quarterback to make mistakes. There's no question about it. Jameis Winston, it's well documented. He's got a 30 interception season on his ledger, so he's willing to put the ball in harm's way, believes in his arm talent. He believes in what he can do out there, and he's definitely an improved player from what we saw back in his Tampa Bay days, but force him to make mistakes. You're the best team, the Broncos, in terms of sacks, in terms of pressure, win rate, all those sorts of things. Force him to make mistakes. And number 3, win the field position battle and dictate the pace of the game. This is not necessarily a game where we saw, Jeff, in primetime on Monday night, we saw the Baltimore Ravens get super aggressive and go for it on fourth down from well within their own side of the field, right? I don't think this is a game where the Broncos need to really mess around with that. They don't need to go out there and say, hey, we're going to be the aggressor. We're going to go for it on fourth down before we get to midfield, or we're not going to take 3 points. We're going to try to get 6. This is a game where I think that you can play sort of an old school Big Ten style game, right? You can go for it in certain situations that dictate, but play the smart field position game, attempt to run the ball effectively and dictate the pace of this game, because if you're dictating the pace of this game, you're going to be able to keep a guy like Myles Garrett at bay a little bit better than what you have in the past or what other teams have in the past. So those are 3 keys to victory for the Denver Broncos as they look to get into the playoffs this season. I think it's going to be a fun matchup.
I think it is, and I think for Browns fans, there's a lot more renewed, I would say, love for watching this team play. I think a lot of people were absolutely ready to just pack it up. Certainly doesn't help that the Cleveland Cavaliers are an unstoppable unit right now. But again, Jameis has made this team more likable. And it's always going to come down to your quarterback, Nick Chubb, Joe Bitonio. They're great. But, if the main guy is not the main guy and he's a very difficult guy to root for, it becomes an unpleasant experience. The losses just make it to the point where you don't care. That narrative is kind of changed right now. And these are all going to be big games for the Browns closing it out. I mean, Cincinnati maybe is wavering, but everybody, that they're going to be playing against is going to be somehow, some way playing for their playoff lives. So, it isn't necessarily so much about being the spoiler, but show up. I mean, everybody understands that this team certainly had a lot of injuries this year. And not that anybody doesn't, but, it's just go out there. You got to battle. And, tanking, it's great for guys like us to say this and set up how we're doing our off-season coverage. And we could, you start using words like that within a locker room or within a front office, everybody can start packing their stuff up and heading on. You cannot show that. You cannot project that. The Giants trying to start Tommy DeVito and now have to start the better quarterback because Tommy DeVito might be in. Like, you look at some of these teams and, and for me, that's, and I was telling before we record here, I think people think when the Cleveland Browns, just because they're not good record-wise, I think everybody just thinks it's a clown show again. Look, this place has been a clown show for years. Trust me, I covered it. It is not a clown show anymore. Yes, it was an unsuccessful season, but it just doesn't mean that all of a sudden, 60 guys with, colored hair and makeup on started, filing out of a Datsun again. It's not. It was just an off year, and certainly, 3 guys with your owner, your general manager, your head coach, all went in heavy on the most important position in all of professional sports, and it failed miserably. But the thing is they're smart enough in so much else that they do they can circumnavigate that. They can surpass it. They did it last year. They could have done it this year if they made a switch a little earlier, and they can still find a way to pay him last year and be ultra competitive next year.
Yeah, I think the Browns may take a page out of the Denver Broncos book in the near future and just say, you know what, we got to eat the dead money. Whatever we got to do, we got to move on at the quarterback position at some point in the near future.
Sarah has it covered Broncos wise at Locked On Broncos. Jeff has it covered Browns wise at Locked On Browns, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's all I have for you here today on the Ultimate NFL Pregame Show. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Of course, next week we'll be back here with more NFL action and getting you ready for week 14, which again, a spoiler for that week. There's a lot of great matches.